First of all, I'll ask your name and what it is you do.
Okay, my name is Yulia and I work for a government agency, which I can't go into too much detail with, but it's a very mentally demanding role. It requires a lot of mental alertness and just, being able to process a lot of information all of the time on the go,
Okay, and tell me about, tell me a bit about how you ended up discovering you had endometriosis.
So I had a laparoscopy in May of this year where I was diagnosed, and it was found on my bladder around my bowel. I had my appendix adhered to the right side of my abdomen, and I had a cyst on my fallopian tube which got removed and the tube got flushed, so just to check that everything was all right. So that was my diagnosis after probably suffering since my first period.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many years are we talking about from the first time that you realised that your pain didn't seem to be the same as perhaps some other people's?
So I'd say about 15 years, nearing on 15 years.
What was your experience with going to doctors and trying to find some answers?
I think in the early years it was definitely around getting on birth control and just managing the symptoms that way, so which I think maybe worked, because up until 19 it was sort of like the symptoms were there but it sort of levelled them out. But then of course over that time I started noticing the other impacts from those hormonal medications, so weight gain, anxiety, depression, different things like that, which just really would affect me on the day-to-day basis. And it got to a point where I spoke with my partner, now husband at that time, and said I don't want to do the birth control thing anymore, so I decided to come off. And then so from around that time until May of this year, things just escalated and ramped up over those years. Yeah,
tell me what happened when you decided to come off birth control, and how did your endo symptoms change?
Definitely began to become noticeable, a lot more noticeable straight away. The pain just escalated, but it was like quite a slow escalation, so it's easy to kind of see over the years. And so I ended up getting investigated for a cyst that was on my left side, and nothing was found at that time. The marina was put in. I kind of have my own thoughts on that surgery, and nothing being found at that time. And so the cyst had kind of disappeared of its own accord, and the marina was put in. I went on with the marina for about a year, and then I woke up one night and it was just stabbing, excruciating pain. And I said to my hubby, I just need to get it out. So I went, it took 3 attempts for them to pull it out, which was a pain I'll never forget. And I was kind of just told, like, it's just part of the game of being a woman, and just push through.
And so how long ago were you given that message?
That would have been 8 years ago, yeah.
When you had that first surgery and nothing was found, tell me about that situation of going into having surgery and then coming out and being told, oh no, everything's fine.
Felt really defeating. It felt like kind of being invalidated, and then questions, well, what is going on? Because something is obviously going on with my body. Already at that time it would cause me a lot of anxiety, so if I was going out somewhere it was kind of like, am I going to end up in pain? Am I going to end up reacting to something I've eaten? I would always take my car somewhere, even if me and my partner were going together, so I could get away if I needed to. And so I definitely noticed that sort of impact on not wanting to socialise as much, kind of hermiting away a bit, spending a lot of time in bed, and sitting down to try and cook meals, and just, so it was slowly starting to ramp up at that point, yeah.
When you came out of that surgery and nothing was found, what sort of reaction did you have from some of the medics that you'd been dealing with?
It was like I was done, like that was it. Like, we've done the surgery, you've got the marina in, and it was like, see you later, and so if you go into the world and you're just kind of like this, you have so many questions still, and I definitely don't feel like I got the level of empathy or compassion to, like, or a redirection, like, are we going to investigate anything else, there was no, like, that's just it, your buck stops here pretty much, and you just need to go on and continue living your life, yeah.
So you continue living your life.
Yeah.
How challenging was it for you to continue to do your job and that kind of thing?
I remember times on shifts, so in other roles that I've held with the department I work with, they were quite physical. I had to be on my feet a lot of the day, often quite long shifts. Sometimes I would work 10 days in a row, and it just became, I had to sleep to survive work, you know, being off sick a lot, because it wasn't just from the pain, but I think your body is responding to something all of the time that's going on inside of it, so you feel quite vulnerable to illness and other things going on as well. So it's just a mix, and so I just felt that I would describe it as a shadow that just slowly started creeping into my life. You know, it started off quite small and then it just started to really take over everything, especially in the last, I'd say, 2 years was when it really like became very significant, and my quality of life just dropped significantly outside of work. Yeah.
When you're doing this quite grueling work, like you say, working lots of days in a row and having to be on your feet a lot of the time, and you don't have a diagnosis, how did you talk with your employer about what was going on, about taking the sick leave and that kind of thing?
In those early years, I probably didn't. Like, once they'd found the cyst, I was able to kind of reference that, and I still went on to say I believe something's going on with my reproductive system and I have pain around my periods, but it would also depend how responsive the person was you were talking to. You know, it's quite a harsh environment at times, so it's not somewhere you're necessarily going to find a lot of empathy around a period, you know, and people have very little understanding, and some women don't even experience cramping around a period, so to actually describe that and have someone understand is like really difficult. So the conversations were never easy, and you're talking about a really vulnerable, almost taboo subject that isn't something that people just talk about. So I think in those early years I would shy away from it, and I would try when I felt maybe I'll get somewhere with this conversation, and then you just kind of get knocked back and you go back into your shell a bit. So in those early years, probably not very much. Yeah.
Did you end up in a situation where you used up all your sick leave, and what do you do then?
All the time. And you just end up having to take unpaid sick leave, because at the end of the day, you physically can't move sometimes, so you just have to do what's right for you. But I think what you try and do to counteract that is you overperform, or you push yourself to perform to a very high, you put yourself under a lot of pressure, because you go, well, if my work is unquestionable, then maybe they can't fire me, or they can't question me, or that, and you know, so those thoughts do run through your head of, you know, well, when is the patient's going to run out, you know, and I've got nothing to bring to the table and say, this is exactly what's going on. I just have to, you know, and that applies not just in the work situation, but all of your personal situations of people that you're trying to explain what's going on as well.
So when you finally get to the point that you're beginning to get a diagnosis, and I suppose what took you back to the doctors, to the specialists more recently?
So in September last year I had a miscarriage at 7 weeks. It was a miscarriage, and so I went through that, and I had the DNC procedure, and then a couple of weeks after that procedure I then passed quite a large clot, so I ended up fevering throughout the night, and I feel like I passed out in my sleep the one night, and then I woke up fine the next morning, and I said, okay, well, if it comes back like that again, then I'll go to hospital. So the next night it happened again, and I just remember we were driving to the hospital and I could just feel every bump in the road, like I was in just excruciating pain. I got to the emergency room and I just curled up on a seat, and I was there for about 5 hours, and then I went to the bathroom and I passed this clot, and I took a photo of it, and I went to the nurses and I was like, this has just happened. And then they got me into a bed, and I was bleeding I was bleeding a lot at that time as well, and so they said, oh well, I think they diagnosed it as endometriosis, which is like a short-term flare-up, it's not a long-term thing. And at that point I said, are you sure it's not endometriosis? And so it was just, no, it's just this short-term thing, and so there was no direction or signpost anywhere else. So going on from that, I got this pain on my left side, and that just ramped out throughout the years. It was like a cramp or a stitch over that ear, and it just got progressively worse. Like I was having to change my sleep position to try and compensate it, or just bending over all the time. And so I got misdiagnosed with that as a kidney infection and took antibiotics for that. And then along with that, my period symptoms just ramped up. So by the last couple of months before my surgery, I was up one night and my like painkillers just don't work for me. And so I ran 3 hot baths in one night, and I have quite bad insomnia as well around that time. So I was just, yeah, like my husband would just leave me to do my thing. He just knew I just have to do what I have to do to manage, and you're just kind of sitting in the bath like, I've got to be up tomorrow morning to go into work and put on a brave face and act like everything's normal. And the pain just excruciating, like cramps that would make you vomit, like, and just, yeah, horrific pain. And so I have a family member who's in the medical field. She does sonography, and she had also engaged with a gynecologist, so she was the one who said to me, I think you should go and get this checked out again, and she had been around at the time of the cyst as well. So I was really reluctant, like I just kept fobbing off the conversation, or being like, it was like I can't sit down again and have this conversation and someone just not take me seriously, but not show me empathy for the whole picture, all of the symptoms, how it's impacting my life. And so eventually I kept going to my GP throughout that year, and I kept saying, I believe this is linking to my period, it happens at this time. I could name the stages of my cycle, this is when these symptoms are happening. And so in the end, she convinced me about the specialist that I went to see, Dr. Jeremy Mates in Napier. And I remember I just like psyched myself up to go into my doctor's office, and I sat down and I was like, I'm having these issues, I believe it's linked to my reproductive system, and I'd really like a referral to a gynecologist. So it took a lot to sort of take charge in that moment, and then that's when I went on to see my specialist. Yeah.
I'm really sorry about your miscarriage.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really frightening,
yeah,
when this kind of stuff,
yeah,
happens, and a little bit of blood goes a long way, but it can be really terrifying in the moment when you're in those situations.
Yeah.
So I'm really sorry that happened.
Thank you.
When you saw the gynecologist, what was that meeting like?
It was actually life-changing. I sat down and I felt like I was finally taken seriously. I don't think I actually even realised that I was taken seriously until after the surgery. So I sat down, my meeting was probably longer than an hour. I ran through all of the symptoms that had happened over all of the years, so all of the things we've discussed over that time period. He took note of everything, asked lots of questions, and said, I'd like to book you in for a surgery, laparoscopic investigative surgery. And I believe he even said in that meeting, like, I believe it's strongly indicative of endometriosis. And that just, like, I don't think I even registered that in the meeting. And then, so he booked me in for a surgery, which I think was only about 4 or 5 weeks out from the time that we met. Now, I am lucky to have medical insurance, so I just want to acknowledge that a lot of people aren't in the situation to have that, and are at the mercy of the public health system, which I was for many years prior. But yeah, so was just so attentive, and like I said, I don't even think I realised how attentive until looking back. And then the surgery happened really quickly, and the evening before the surgery, I remember he called me to just check in. He was like, are you worried about anything tomorrow? And I said, I'm just worried to waste anybody's time. Yeah, yeah, I don't want to waste anybody's time. That was my main concern.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
You're all good, you make it, it's fine. It's not, it's not right.
Yeah.
It's always the terror. Yeah. You're frightened of wasting anyone's time. I suppose there's a lot to unpack in that one. You'd previously had gynecological surgery.
Yeah.
Was that, do you think, part of what was influencing you and thinking, am I going to wake up tomorrow and they're going to say there's nothing?
Yeah, probably. And just probably all of the hundreds of, I couldn't even count how many times I would go to a GP or a doctor's office and complain about the symptoms or about frequently getting sick or pains in my body, and trying to link it and like voice or advocate for myself that I believe it was linked to, you know, my reproductive system. And it just, yeah, just all those years of being fobbed off, and definitely after that first surgery, I did not experience the same level of care at that time at all. I don't even remember having a conversation where we even dove too deeply into, you know, I touched on things that have been going on, but there wasn't that safe space I felt of where I wasn't rushed, I was being listened to, I had the time to fully explain everything, you know, and not only that, but, you know, the difference with my second surgery and specialist was that the notes that followed, like just everything was so detailed, like this person really paid attention, they really took on board everything from a medical perspective, like what else is going on as well, and just validated it,
So when you had that second surgery, what was it like waking up from that one?
It was amazing. So I had my surgery at Carwick Hospital in Hastings, which was just phenomenal. Everything from going in to coming out was just amazing, and I woke up and all the nurses were like chattering and laughing around me and just so kind and gentle and again attentive, and everyone was like, wow, like, you know, so sorry for what they found and how are you living with that, and they just seemed to be really aware of what endometriosis does to the body, and so there was this empathy, like, you know, okay, you've made it over the finish line kind of thing. So I was just wrapped up in so much love there, and so I was there for 4 days because after the surgery I had some bruising it was just around my whole abdomen, and that probably slowed down a bit of my recovery as well. It was quite painful, it was like very extensive bruising, which can happen just with these procedures. So I ended up in for 4 days and 3 nights, and by the end of it I felt like I was saying goodbye to family. Like I hugged everybody down to the receptionist, that me and the cleaner were like best friends, and I just so enjoyed I almost didn't want to leave, and it was the best place to just finally be like, oh my gosh, like I've got an answer. And yeah, so my experience waking up was very different this time.
So after that, when were you able to start work again, and how open did you feel you wanted to be with your employer about the surgery and the outcome?
So we'd been on a bit of a journey. So from the events that happened the year previous with the miscarriage, I'd started talking to managers that I had over that time. Now, each of them were as receptive as they could be to what I could tell them at that time, what I had to on paper to say this is what's going on. So it was a slow build over that year, and even prior to that. So my current manager was just phenomenal. And I just want to acknowledge him, and he's a male. And I was not sure, but I was like, heck, like this is ramping up and I just have to dive in and I have to just talk about it. And so the first conversation I ever had to have with him was about needing to go home because of my period pain. And I said, I'm going to investigate it again. Right now, I can't even think straight. I need to go home. And again, that was one of those times when I got home and I just had this surging cramp, and I just vomited. Like, it was just so painful. And so we just continued having the conversations, and I said to him, I'm having this surgery to investigate, and I took 2 days off work for the surgery because I didn't believe that they were going to find anything. So after the surgery, I woke up and I was obviously on a lot of medication. Like, I was probably sitting on Mars at that point. And I remember just calling him and I was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I took 2 days off. I'm going to be off for 4 weeks now. And I just remember saying something like, they've just excavated my insides or something, and sort of telling them everything that they found. And he put this all into quite an articulate email summarising everything, and just absolutely met me with so much grace and compassion. And the conversations just continued on from there. So while I was on that leave, I had to then extend it because my recovery was just taking a little bit longer. So I think I ended up off for about 5 weeks. But not only that, as time went on and I returned to work following the surgery, I've just had continued gut issues. So because of probably what they removed off the bowel, and who knows, maybe the impacts of endometriosis being in my body for that long, something might be going on with my digestive system, so I'm investigating that. So I found that the pressure really ramped up at work and the stress, and I was probably a bit burnt out from all of the events. And I've had, you know, some pretty significant events in my life outside of all of this as well, which have just compiled over the years. So I was in this really confronting place of like finally being validated, and you're almost learning to live a new life, because it's like, okay, I know what's going on, but I also know there's a road ahead, like it's quite unknown, you don't know what to expect. And so the conversations just had to keep continuing, and I ended up getting to a place where I just hit a wall and I completely burnt out, and I sat down with my manager and a whole bunch of the leadership team, and I was really vulnerable, and I just told them a lot about my life personally, then how the last year had impacted on me and built up to this point, and why I just needed to step away, and particularly with the gut issues. I mean, like, I was just so busy at work, and it was just getting harder and harder to like create a quiet place where I could just sit down and eat properly, or process food, or you're worrying like how is my body going to react to this food? Do I need to run to the bathroom in 5 minutes? You know, so all of these things, and continued pain. So that was a really vulnerable and hard conversation to have, to sit down and really open up, you know, with people. Yeah.
With the ongoing gut issues that you've had, and I guess also in previous roles, have you had good enough and easy enough access to bathrooms to be able to take breaks, to you know, to be able to manage some of those kind of physical signs?
I definitely think, like, there's always been bathrooms and there's always been places to cook food and things like that, but it can sometimes be about time pressure, work pressure. You know, it's not so easy to, you know, the day can just so easily get away on you on what I'm doing, and you can have all of the best intentions, but you know, something really important has to be done within a really urgent time frame. So it's a lot easier said than done sometimes. And so I do think that facilities could be a bit more, just generally speaking in the workplace, could be a lot more you know, conducive to women who might be having issues in that area. Yeah.
I'm interested as well in, I'm not quite sure what job you do or whether this applies to you, but was there anything around wearing particular clothing for your job? Was any of that restrictive? Was that something that impacted at all?
Not so much. I mean, I have to dress quite formally, but I mean, in some of my earlier roles, yes, like I was wearing equipment and things on my body that was quite heavy, and it would kind of add to the weight and the pressure of the day-to-day tasks. So that was something that impacted on me. Not so much now, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you're just sitting there and I'm like, I really want to be in stretchy pants right now. Not these things while my stomach's bloating. You know, like sometimes when I get bloating, it's like I can look 4 or 5 months pregnant, and it just happens suddenly, like within an hour, and it almost feels like your skin's just going to rip on your stomach, and you're just in like so much pain. Yeah.
So certainly at the moment, it sounds like you've got a really supportive situation at work, which is fantastic. Are you able to continue some of those conversations about, you know, if you need to work flexible hours, or if you need to work shorter days or shorter shifts and that kind of thing? And, you know, how much of a difference is that making to your life?
Being able to actually say what's going on and name it and have that validation has created a really strong foundation for me to now have those conversations. And there is capacity for those things to happen, but it helps for there to be that realisation that there is a genuine need for it, and you know, being able to open up and actually talk about how significantly things can impact on me, and it's not predictable. Do you know what I mean? So it's like having one set day maybe, but then having the ability to go and have a conversation and go, well, actually today, like if I can tidy up this, am I able to go and tuck myself away for 2 hours and just finish up what I need to do in a space that's safe for me, because this is going on, you know. So, but while I'm lucky to have those conversations and my boss has been really receptive about it, a lot of that has come from me having to be really brave and talk about things that normally you wouldn't probably be that comfortable about speaking about. You know what I mean? It's not the normal conversation you sort of have in the workplace very often.
What about colleagues? How do they, I mean, is there any awkward questions around why you perhaps work in a slightly different way, or is there anything like that that is a bit of a challenge?
I think by nature that is always the case when, you know, someone's kind of working and then they have to disappear, or, you know, these sorts of things. And I try and be quite open. Like if someone asks me, I'll talk to them about it. Do you know what I mean? But yes and no. Like I think a lot of my colleagues are quite supportive. They don't always know how much is going on and how significant it is, but I do my best to just try and let them know. And you do feel a sense that you have to explain yourself a little bit at times. So yeah, that pressure does come in, and that's, I don't want to put that on my colleagues. It's something that I feel sometimes that I need to do, you know. Yeah.
So I guess, how do you feel now that you've had your surgery? Hopefully you're, you know, continuing to have an investigation done and that kind of thing, but where do you feel in terms of your health, and how solid do you feel in yourself and the care you're getting?
Yeah, I feel a lot more confident that I'm getting good care, that I have hope to continue having these conversations and try and normalise it in my workplace at least, and I feel that I'm getting a receptive response to that need.
What is the support like that you're getting? I guess both from the medical team and how empowering is it to be able to have some of those solid foundations at home, at work, and through the doctors?
No, it really is empowering, because, you know, at home it's finally given answers to sort of like me and my husband as to why I was so drained all the time, you know, having to come home and nap every day and like just slowly being able to do less and less around the house over those years. Like, it was really bad right before my surgery. And so at home, at work, with my specialist team, it just feels like I can advocate for myself. And if there's still a chance that I'm going to come across, I guess, sometimes medical staff forget that the person they're telling something or working through something with, this procedure or this thing that needs to happen, isn't something that happens every day for them, you know. So I think it's just that mindfulness, and I'm still going to have to sort of have those conversations around, like, I feel like I need to put a like handle with care like sticker on my forehead sometimes, because it's like, you know, so like when I got told I need to do the endoscopy and the colonoscopy, like I've actually witnessed a colonoscopy through a previous role that I did, so that's a story for another day, but I was quite traumatized by that. So, you know, when I was told, oh look, you're going to have this procedure, I was actually already in the back of my mind like, I really hope I don't have to go for that procedure, you know. So and so the person on the other end of the phone, like, bless them, was just, you know, trying to book me in and get me on the pathway to that next step of treatment. But I was like, I'm actually really nervous about this, you know, like, put me on an operating table, put me on this, but this is the one thing that I'm quite nervous about, you know. So yeah, I think it's still a journey in terms of having to, I feel confident in my care, but I feel like there's still going to be those conversations along the way where I just have to kind of like maybe remind people, like, this is who I am, this is, you know, just be gentle with me in the process, you know, I'm still learning and I've still, you know, got to manage everything along the way as well. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was great to talk to you.
Thank you.